First place I started, because there's actually you won't go into literature or anywhere and find a textbook that shows you a lot of comparisons of wood to lignite. So the first thing I looked into was actually how do we look from a sort of a approximate analysis point of view. And I guess you could say they're not wildly different. There's your moisture, total moisture. The lignite's typically about 40%, and you might say, well, green wood is the same sort of ballpark. I mean, maybe 50 or 40, but it's that same sort of ballpark. The big thing about wood, it's got a lot of volatiles and it's less fixed carbon, whereas your lignite, like other coals, has got less volatiles and probably more fixed carbon. So that tells you something about it's going to burn differently, obviously, in a boiler, and that's going to follow through to your emissions to air. I should say, but they're the same colour, but of course, if you really go into it, the volatiles in coal and the volatiles in wood are not the same thing. Yes, they're volatiles, but you'll find woods, obviously it's 30 years old or 20 years old or whatever, where coal's millions of years old, so you'll expect to see differences, and especially much heavier types of hydrocarbon. So that's, I guess, from a starting point, it's useful to just understand those differences. And then look at the CHON, so that we look at carbon, hydrogen, when we do combustion calculations, we look at the carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, sulphur, and obviously lignite there's not much sulphur, but there's some, and your wood here you've got virtually none. Big difference is really the oxygen, a lot of oxygen in wood, not much oxygen in coal. So what does that mean? Don't really know, but you've got to go through and look at emissions and actually measure really what it means in terms of what pollutants coming up. So I guess what I'm talking about today is really right now we sit in a situation where, I guess, for large energy plant, coal-fired boilers, that really the costs per gigajoule really are quite substantial for wood compared to, say, lignite and Southland. So that's indicative of probably where things sit right now. It might not quite be that extreme, but it's something like that. And the question is actually, what if we consider what might happen in terms of environmental drivers globally and locally, and how that might change the balance. So what I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes is really about how climate change, the Mercury Convention, PM 2.5, which is a large part of it is the condensables that we heard about before, and just how they may change that balance over time, and if in fact you get this sort of situation in 10, 15, 20 years time. So let's just talk about the Mercury Convention. New Zealand's signed up to that. I'm not sure if they've actually ratified it yet, but I understand we're on the path to, or I don't see any great stumbling block for that not being ratified. What it really means is that so I was actually asked to review it on behalf of Fonterra and make a submission to the Select Committee on the convention back in sometime last year, early last year. So I delved into it and read all the articles very carefully, and really what I concluded was that there's kind of a lot of uncertainty about what it will mean for boilers in New Zealand which burn coal. And there'll be articles in that convention will capture coal-fired energy plant, and the new plant within 5 years from the convention being sort of coming into force, there could be expectation to have controls and use of best available techniques, or what they call best environmental practices being imposed. And then for existing coal-fired boiler, that'll be another 10 years out from the actual enforcement. Now, when you look into it, the threshold for what sort of boiler that would capture in terms of megawatts, really it's going to come down to basically setting a megawatt level where that'll capture 75% of our national mercury emissions from coal-fired plant. And when you look into it and you look at what sort of coal-fired plants are out there, it's not clear if that would capture a 20 megawatt or a 30 megawatt boiler, but it's certainly could come down to that sort of level. If you look at what the Americans call the MAC technology, which is most achievable control technology for mercury, it involves such things as activated carbon powder injection, baghouse recovery of that powder, etc. Quite a lot of complicated processes. because mercury is largely a gas, is, volatile. It goes off as a vapour. Some is associated with very fine particles, but largely conventional baghouse won't capture that very well. So, but the sort of standard technology has been used in the States, mainly for large plants, like we're talking about power plants, etc. These sort of carbon injected type systems. But if you look at applying that technology to sort of medium-sized boilers in New Zealand, that cost of it would be extremely high. So, and I'm not trying to suggest that's going to definitely happen, but that's just one of a potential. I think personally, with Manata Convention, we've signed up to it. There has been a national interest analysis undertaken by what appears to be a bunch of 25-year-olds in MEP, from my observation. But I mean, when we went to the select committee, they had their troops sitting there to the side and were asked what actually is behind this analysis, and got a lot of blank faces, and they were quite young. And I thought to myself, really, what I said to the select committee, I think New Zealand's flying blind in terms of what this really is going to mean in terms of imposition of controls on coal-fired boilers. I think we've signed up to it without too much technical input. Anyway, so that's just one little thing, is that we could find in the future that there's pressure on coal-fired users to do something about mercury. And one of the options, obviously, is here's one reason why you might convert to wood, is that and lignite. These numbers are just indicative. Don't take them as hard and fast, but it's sort of roughly an order of magnitude reduction. I mean, the bottom line is that wood's not included in the convention because it's not seen as a high mercury emitting type process or activity. Right, so climate change, and I'm not a climate change expert, but I do read what's going on and keep a track of statements in a paper and what MEPs say, etc. So right now, you'd have to say the carbon price is right through the floor. You can rush off to Europe and buy emission credits there for peanuts and carry on business as usual in New Zealand. But we're probably all well aware there's a conference coming up in Paris this end of this year, and it really seems to be, if you really look at all the sort of talk in the media and reading bits and pieces, it really is quite clear that this is seen as there's a serious momentum now with all the flood events and extreme weather events we've been having the last few years. Suddenly the tide has turned, and there's a real fear out there that climate change has got to the point where it could already be an acceleration phase where we can't do anything about it. There's even a fear of it. We've got to the point where there's so much methane being liberated from swamps in the Arctic that it's too late. We're at that point, and we're seeing these events in Europe, very extreme, massive droughts, etc. California, Thailand, even Sao Paulo ran out of water. All of this is culminating in a sort of will amongst people to get, well, I guess, an anxiety and a fear now, and realisation that this could be real. And so I think what it means is, come Paris Convention, that you might see some real hard reductions being accepted by a lot of countries. Yeah, MEPs just released their discussion document and request for feedback. The GC, or just so G7, Canada, France, you probably know better more than I do, but US, UK, etc. They have come out recently, but well, that's just the press this I think it was this Monday or Tuesday, the 10th of you can't read that, I can't read that. It's the 10th of June, believe me. Okay, so that's the press, and so they're saying farewell to carbon fuels, and what they're really saying is that over the next 50 to 100 years we've got to really get off these fuels, which is no great surprise. So you might say a lot of gestures from the G7. I've threatened to actually put around where Golder Associates a caption competition on that one, and my MD said to me, you might be breaking Golder core values, and I think that's more sort of reason to do it. But anyway, that's Merkel and Obama, by the way, if you can't see. I think it's a sitter for a caption. Anyway, so right, so if you look at if we do see in Paris something quite significant come out of in terms of country commitments, and I think New Zealand's really up against the wall of it here to really front up with maybe a 10% reduction from 1990 emissions, will be my guess. And you look at it, and we know that we can't do much about this in a hurry. With this research going on, there's a lot of promise that there could be reductions here, but really, if we can't really bank a lot on being able to reduce in the agricultural sector, it doesn't leave much and this is really in here, and here is really your big coal-fired boiler alliance in, and what have you. So I can see, you know, but politically as transport, well, yeah, that government's going to really love to increase fuel taxes, aren't they, and get into power. So I think it's a sitter for some meaty commitments in that sector. Which I think it's down the barrel of it, personally. So I'll just do a little couple of points about wood. Feel free to shoot me down, but basically it's what I was going to say here was really, it does strike me as that, you know, when we talk a lot about bringing wood to the source and processing it, and it strikes me that the thing about wet green wood is that you're transporting roughly 1 tonne per tonne of dry matter. It's basically it's water. You're trucking a lot of water, and so I can't help think that ultimately centralised drying of wood and using real rubbish material, even trucking high energy density material is probably important in the future. Boilers get banked a lot in the industry, but you know, so you don't really either quite turn them off. Well, maybe be careful in the future we don't have industrial boilers being banked and producing methane. Right, so that's enough about climate change. Right, so we heard a bit before about condensables, and so one of the drivers more locally, this is all global stuff, but now more locally is you've got to say in the last 5 years particularly, there's been a heck of a change and sort of like I guess a penny's dropped a bit about what's really driving health effects, air quality health effects, and it's really come down to mainly what we call PM2.5 and probably submicron particulate, and that's 2.5 is 2.5 microns or less in aerodynamic diameter. Basically it's bloody small, right? And it's so small that it goes into it's right into your lungs and goes through even cell membranes, etc. So it causes a whole range of effects, heart disease, cardiovascular, the list goes on. Whereas DRL-SO2, as an example of sulfur dioxide, has very temporary respiratory effects, and there's no real clear link to those sort of more long-term, I guess, serious diseases. So what you've got, just a hodgepodge here of Parliamentary Commission on the Environment coming out recently in March, really saying that NES is quite inadequate, and it's really we need to move to 2.5 and an annual average number. So what we're really saying here is that we really are steering a barrel, I think, of seeing an ambient standard or some regulatory pressure to regulate PM2.5 and maybe one day even PM1 and less. And more so focus on that than say PM10 or TSP, but your total particulate. What are the implications for industry? Well, and you know, a number of our clients are going through this right now where we're looking at saying, well, you know, if you want to look at, if say this 2.5 becomes a reality in the next 5-10 years, what does that mean for your control technology? And as you heard before, the previous speech, I think Lloyd mentioned how in baghouses it's quite standard practice to run at a certain temperature so your condensables don't condense and they go through and don't block out your baghouse. Well, if we're trying to really, if that's a fraction really causing the most severe health effects, then obviously our baghouses aren't worth too much to us, despite being worth $5 million for a 40 megawatt boiler plant. So what does that say? We may have to move towards ESPs or something else. I mean, the general feeling in the States is that we're looking at baghouses with special materials and special coatings, or ESPs that are wet ESPs, etc. But basically, it says that again in the future you may well find that the PM2.5 regulation of that can have quite significant consequences in terms of the cost of your control technology. And what's considered now as best practice would be a baghouse, probably won't cut it. It's all bad news, isn't it? Okay, so what is the benefit of changing to wood provide us? And look, it's not easy to really be definitive here and quantitative, but if you look at USEPA emission factors, you look at wood combustion for industrial boilers versus coal-fired boilers, well, there's actually no difference. In actual fact, coal's better, right? From a combustion standpoint, it makes no sense. And if you look at the composition of wood, it makes no sense. If you look at the actual experience of being of a heat recovery example you saw before, it makes no sense. What I think's happened is that historically we've measured particulate using a filter method, and we've never really looked at the condensed fraction. The condensable method came out some years ago, but it was very, it wasn't what I call robust. It's only really since in the last couple of years it's become a robust method, and we're now starting to see a true contribution of a condensable fraction in terms of fine particles being measured in boiler stacks. So what's the potential benefits if you go to wood? In that case is that, well, basically, I think my understanding of looking at wood versus coal is that, and look at the volatile fractions and their different nature, that there's every reason why an industrial wood-fired boiler can produce much lower condensables and much lower PM2.5 just through better combustion conditions and the way it's designed. I think there's opportunity there where a coal-fired boiler doesn't quite have. So that means meeting future limits and standards through the use of wood and good combustion design, rather than having to spend money on baghouses and what have you, and the high electricity cost that goes with that, and high OPEX costs. But what I'd also say is, and I wasn't really aware of the work being done down here with the dry cleaners, but I think with the new methods coming out, the EPA 201A, it's a filter and condensable method for measuring particulate. With that being applied, we'll start to see what really the differences are, and the benefits wood can provide, wood combustion. So I did front up some hard data. This is all US EPA data, and just to make the point before is that if you look at it, lignite versus wood, these are emission factors. These are grams per megajoule. Megajoule not delivered to the system, but just megajoule combustion. All right. There's no great changes really. If we look at 2.5, in actual fact, you say, well, lignite's better. But as I say, I think this data is really outdated and doesn't bear out the reality of what we're seeing. And the reality is that you can run a wood-fired boiler and scrub it sustainably, like we saw this morning. You try and do it with coal, you'd be in big trouble in terms of blinding up, and that's because all the condensables which are there, which are basically incomplete products of combustion, and that's what's driving your PM 2.5 and your ultrafines. So ignore this figure when you look at it again, but just be aware of that point. So to really wrap this up, I thought I'd better chuck in the other contaminants. Well, I mean, no surprise, lignite has high. This is lignite, bark, wet wood and dry wood. So looking at NOx here, now one advantage of having wet wood is it does dampen the flame temperature and does dampen NOx production, but in New Zealand, apart from maybe Auckland, we don't really have a NOx issue, so that may be an advantage in an Auckland shed. Down here below, like this morning, I don't know if we have a NOx issue or a potential photochemical smog issue. But volatiles and NOx certainly together give a big problems overseas with photochemical smog. But anyway, SO2, well, lignite's got some, wood's got very little, no surprise. The only advantage really there, I mean, what I find is that SO2 for industrial boilers, you generally can mitigate those health effects quite effectively through stack height and a localised effects, and after that there's no real issue. But again, what might loom up is that most of the SO2 which is produced does turn ultimately into ultrafine, and when the USPA recently, well not recently, a few years ago they had a new SO2 standard, a new ambient standard, which is quite a lot lower than the old one, and when the cost benefits in terms of health and the cost for industry to actually meet that standard, one of the biggest health benefit in terms of cost wasn't SO2. It was actually piffle. The amount of health benefit due to reduced SO2 was really spear change. What really ran into the hundreds of millions or more than that was the SO2 going to ultrafines and being health effects that causes. When you look at the benefit of that not happening, it was actually huge. So, and then of course, if we look at, I don't want to talk about dioxins too much, but we do have conventions around dioxins, and we have to manage those at a national level. Of course, this is your wood comparisons here. So here's furans, here's your nasty dioxin, and it's just basically saying, obviously wood's relatively clean. and it just parallels what we see of condensables. Mercury, we've talked about that before. It's just showing you the data I showed you before. I'm saying graph just to repeat myself. So that's it. So really in conclusion, I don't think there's any strong drivers there's no strong environmental or regulatory drivers there at the moment to really offset those costs of the biomass for large boilers. I'm not talking about the scale we're looking at. I think when you're burning diesel or fuel oil, then the wood case clearly stacks up. But for industry who can buy lignite in Southland quite cheaply, but right now those environmental benefits don't stack up against those costs. So really, the things I've talked about, the Monarta Convention, I think climate change, what comes out of that, PM 2.5, those three things particularly could well change that whole balance over the next, who knows, 10, 15, 20 years. And it's just, I guess, be a case of waiting and seeing. I think my gut feeling is that really the heat recovery options we saw this morning, and looking at the true cost of delivering a gigajoule to your process, I think that area is going to be what will really, improvements in that efficiency will be what will drive the use of wood in preference of coal more than the environmental in the short term. And on that note, I think, again, my gut feeling would be, but if say out of a convention, out of the Paris meeting, you suddenly have a coal-fired operation requiring to reduce emissions by 20% or 10%, then obviously a wood-coal mix is one way of possibly doing that. And obviously some technical issues around doing that, but it might be an easier bite than the whole conversion.